What if MrBeast took on Jabba the Hutt? In the regular Star Wars timeline, Jabba is the most influential person on Tatooine, until Leia kills him in Return of the Jedi. One of our viewers, though, posed the question of what if instead we insert MrBeast into the equation and he took over Jabba's territory? That's the doozy of a scenario that we'll be exploring today. So, strap into your spaceships, grab some spotchka, non-alcoholic if you're underaged, and let's dive right in to this wild what if scenario. Our story begins on Coruscant during the days of the Galactic Republic with a young, aspiring entertainer named James Donaldson. With the recent uptick in users of social media on the HoloNet throughout the galaxy, and the trends towards creators using these platforms becoming a primary source of entertainment for viewers, James ends up joining the frenzy. At first, he has a difficult time gaining an audience, especially in the Outer Rim. However, soon, his influence begins to pick up. James, now known more frequently by his stage name of MrBeast, begins to see funds come back to him, and he is ecstatic. His creativity has paid off, and many are considering him a pioneer in the genre of social media HoloNet entertainment. His net worth continues to increase, and he develops a positive reputation in the eyes of many. In fact, many influential politicians even begin to star in his videos as an effort to boost their own popularity across the galaxy, and with their voter base. However, MrBeast also begins to make enemies. His philanthropic efforts in the Outer Rim start to disturb some of the crime lords there. Jabba, mainly, is quite displeased when MrBeast begins to advocate against slavery in Hutt space, and he actually gives money to slaves to buy their freedom for one of his videos, entitled, "I Freed 1,000 Slaves on Tatooine." How do these events impact the rest of our story? Let's keep going and find out. For one of the videos that MrBeast is making, he travels to Tatooine to rent the pod racing track and try some pod racers on his own, along with some of his media teammates. He goes onto the track with the legendary Ben Quadraneros, and he manages to complete an entire lap with some immense difficulty. There were times when the four-armed alien had to backseat pilot, as MrBeast's lack of experience likely would have killed him, but in the end, he makes it out alive, and he thanks the legendary pod racer for his service. That evening, MrBeast and his camera crew go out into Mos Espa for a little tour, and for some footage to put in the video. However, during that time, MrBeast is approached by one of Jabba's gangsters. They're upset with his presence in Jabba's territory, especially after he'd given freedom to many of the slaves in that video discussed earlier. The Hutts despise MrBeast, and this gangster is willing to take him in by any means necessary to satisfy the crime boss. In this moment, though, the wealthy content creator has an idea. He knows that these are just guns for hire, and that the guy truly has no loyalty to the Hutts. So he offers the gangster a position in his company if he's let off, one with solid benefits that will pay far better than Jabba does. The gangster, seeing a chance to get out of this life of crime, actually agrees. Then, MrBeast gets another idea. He turns to his media production team, and he tells them that he knows of a video that he thinks will get them much more views and media attention. Then, he says to his team that they're going to visit Jabba. This is where the fun would truly begin. MrBeast enters Jabba's palace, camera crew in tow, and he ends up using the same strategy as he did during the encounter with Jabba's grunt in Mos Espa to seduce the guards at the door. They take jobs as members of his security team, and these Gamorreans let him into the palace. MrBeast walks into Jabba's throne room with his camera crew recording everything, widely uninterrupted, as he enters the room, and he starts to make a scene. He offers everyone in the Crime Lord's palace an immediate 100,000 Republic credits if they join him, and he also says that he'd be able to provide them all with legitimate jobs within his growing media empire. Jabba orders that his men apprehend MrBeast, but many of them hesitate. While MrBeast doesn't have any weapons on him, the Gamorrean guards that he just hired do, and so do his camera crew. Even Bib Fortuna, Jabba's most loyal servant, takes pause at this offer. However, after a moment's hesitation, Jabba's men start to fire. A fight breaks out between those who want to take MrBeast's offer and the ones who are loyal to the Hutt crime lord. MrBeast jumps under a table, remarking about how crazy this whole situation is for the cameras to capture. He hides out while the commotion continues, and his media team records the entire ordeal. Finally, the situation settles down, and peace resumes. When MrBeast pops out from his hiding place, he sees that his new team members have actually prevailed over the seasoned crime lords. It seems like his offers to get many of them out of a life of slavery and criminal activity with Jabba appealed to many of them. And now they stood surrounding the Hutt crime lord, waiting for MrBeast to tell them what to do next. Being the kind-hearted guy that he is, MrBeast offers Jabba a seat at the table. He tells the Hutt that he can become a legitimate businessman and that they can work together for the benefit of the galaxy at large. Jabba scoffs at this offer, wanting to retain his power, and MrBeast ends up imprisoning both him and Bib Fortuna. He tells his media team to stop recording, and he joins in the lifting of Jabba's massive throne into the dungeon below. MrBeast doesn't want power. Instead, he hopes to legitimize business in the Outer Rim, and he wants to continue his endeavor of entertaining people across the galaxy. When his video releases that's entitled, "I Usurped Jabba the Hutt," it immediately becomes the most viral HoloNet video to have ever been produced. It also stirs the pot of controversy on the galactic stage. Many applaud MrBeast's efforts to rid the Outer Rim of crime and legitimize business in the area. However, there are others who wonder if his vigilante justice is justified, and they doubt whether his control over the region will be better than the Hutt regime. Crime syndicates that compete with the Hutts, such as the Black Sun and the Pikes, are pleased to see that their competitors are weakened. However, when they reach out to MrBeast and try to gain a footing in the area, he shoos them away, angering even more of the organized crime rings in the galaxy. MrBeast pivots from creating content for the purpose of entertainment to that of detailing his experience in regime change and the day-to-day life of ruling over Tatooine as a benevolent figurehead. His first order of business is freeing all of the slaves, which makes the general population incredibly pleased with him. In the same breath, he also frees the Rancor, which Jabba had been keeping as a pet for many years. The Rancor and his owner end up running free throughout the Tatooine deserts together, happy as can be. MrBeast hires many of the old slaves to become his security team, and they ensure the safety of citizens and of himself. MrBeast doesn't collect taxes due to his media empire being expansive enough and generating enough revenue to allow him to provide services to his people. MrBeast begins education initiatives, establishes a healthcare system, and begins funding public infrastructure projects to better develop the desert planet's economy. He makes many agreements with the Tusken Raider tribes, which his government upholds, recognizing their sovereignty, and he commits not to developing on their land. For this, they grant him their promise that they will not interfere with his citizens, and that they will respect his cities in turn. His security team eventually starts to morph into a full-on planetary defense force, and soon, MrBeast is able to declare Tatooine as a sovereign galactic government. He also receives invitations from senators to visit the Galactic Republic's capital, but he has no interest in that. Instead, he keeps making content, and he continues to use his wealth to fund Tatooine's growth. While many citizens are in favor of this development, the crime syndicates are still angry. The Hutt Council calls a meeting, and they decry MrBeast as a violent terrorist. When the members of the Black Sun and the Pikes catch wind of this, they agree, and they decide that it's time to bring MrBeast's control of Tatooine to an end. They fear that he'll start to advance on their territory as well, and they want to ensure that nobody infringes on their profits. Luckily for them, it's at this time that Maul is working with his brother, Savage, to build the Shadow Collective. When he approaches each of the individual syndicates with the Mandalorians, they are all willing to join his collective under one condition: that the brothers prioritize the defeat of MrBeast, whose media empire continues to grow and gain popular support from the Republic. Maul agrees to this condition, and he tells both Savage and Pre Vizsla that they just needed to have a little bit more patience in attaining their goals. This was just another roadblock to overcome, and surely MrBeast wouldn't be able to defend against their full might. Over the course of the Clone Wars, Tatooine had become a vibrant hub of trade, commerce, and economic growth that is centered around MrBeast's media brand. The population of Tatooine absolutely loves him, and his standing military grows stronger day by day. They become prominent members of the League of Neutral Systems, and MrBeast tries to stay out of the Clone Wars as much as possible. The Gamorreans that he initially hired with security positions on his team now become prominent planetary defense force leaders, along with the hired gun that initially expressed his intent to kill MrBeast. They're very grateful for his liberation of them from the world of crime, and they intend to serve him as best they can. As the day of the annual Bunta Eve Classic draws near, these Defense Force leaders work tirelessly to ensure that they keep Mos Espa in check as the parties and chaos that normally comes with this classic engulfs the city. However, they don't expect what's coming for them in the long run. As the Bunta Eve Classic begins, MrBeast slams a ceremonial gong that commences the race before sitting down in his chair. The event is being live streamed to a massive audience, and he's keeping them entertained with his vibrant personality. Foden and Beat are next to him as well, giving a running commentary for this live stream, and they're being paid handsomely for their services. However, in the middle of this event, klaxons began to sound around the city of Mos Espa. Everyone perks up, wondering what the commotion is. Soon, they see it. Ships begin to appear in the sky from each of the major crime cartels, along with Mandalorian vessels. MrBeast orders the mobilization of his planetary defense force, and he calls off the Bunta Eve race and tells everybody to get to safety. Something big was coming to Tatooine. MrBeast had finally pissed off too many people, and he needed to be ready for anything. At first, MrBeast's defense force is able to hold up against the onslaught from the criminal alliance. MrBeast continues to stream, and he commentates on the situation. He uses his platform as a cry to help for those watching, saying that he has no idea what's going on, and that if anyone is able to come to the aid of the people of Tatooine, now is the time. Then, he decides to remain in the pod racing box, where he deems it safe, and he continues to stream the events of Tatooine for the galaxy to see. One of his hired Gamorrean guns orders a small, ragtag group of starfighters into the sky in an attempt to hinder the blockade of the Shadow Collective. They had already begun landing troops on the ground, and the people of Mos Espa end up getting absolutely massacred, as do the starfighters as soon as they get up into the sky. Their measly defense capabilities are nothing in comparison to the force powers of Maul and Savage, who cut through fighters like they're butter. Deathwatch, led by Pre Vizsla, also absolutely destroys a significant number of the combatants. One of the things that the civilians have an advantage in, though, is the terrain. They know the city far better than their invaders, and they use this to their advantage. Many of those who are able to take up their own personal arms from their homes do so, taking potshots at the criminals roaming the streets, even if they aren't in the security force. They're dedicated to protecting Tatooine, especially since now it was a much happier place to live. These citizens are committed to MrBeast, and they're eager to help him preserve what he had built. Sadly, once Maul and Savage get a hold of many of these people, as they roam the streets like demons, they slaughter them mercilessly. Another interesting factor about this battle is that the Rancor Tamer and his Rancor come back to the city, and they are absolutely ready to fight. They see what's going on from the deserts, from their home, and they want to help. So they go into the city, and the Rancor Tamer is riding his beast, ferociously knocking many criminals off to the side, and even taking Maul and Savage off guard. The two are forced to pivot their attention to fighting this Rancor and to fighting the man on top of it. They end up battling this beast, and their lightsabers have difficulty piercing through the Rancor's skin. Eventually, however, after this beast absolutely destroys many of the criminal forces, they take it down and they stab the Rancor Tamer through the back. The Rancor is dead, and the last big advantage that these citizens had to save their city is also gone with it. After this altercation with the Rancor, Pre Vizsla and the Mandalorians end up making their way to the pod racing track with their jetpacks, where they find MrBeast continuing his live stream. The HoloNet creator is by no means a warrior, but his guards certainly are. The ones that he had freed from Jabba have remained loyal to him, and they fight back against the incoming Mandalorians. The gunslinger that initially wanted to kill MrBeast ends up valiantly defending him against Pre Vizsla, who wields the darksaber with prowess. Bo-Katan also cuts down many of the people in the room with MrBeast, which includes the two Gamorreans from earlier in the story. Eventually, all of his protectors have fallen, and MrBeast is all alone. Vizsla smiles as he raises his saber, saying that he would take pleasure in this kill, and that it would be one of the many in his quest for the reconquest of Mandalore. MrBeast prepares himself, ready for the blow. He closes his eyes, thinking that this will be the end. But by some miracle of the Force, that blow never comes. MrBeast looks up, and he sees that Vizsla and his band of Mandos have been distracted by a small force of clones that has entered the room. They have different armor than the ones that he's seen in the past, a dark gray color instead of the pristine white, and they seem to be elite fighters. There are patterns of red that are also on each of their pieces of armor. There are 5 of them, and each of the clones seem to specialize in something different. It's the first time that MrBeast can recall seeing a clone force not headed by a Jedi that's given a group of Mandalorians trouble. Then again, MrBeast hadn't seen much of either group in real life until today. Eventually, Vizsla gets tired of battling with these Republic soldiers, as it had no real relevance on his quest to retake Mandalore. What good was having a bunch of crime bosses on his side when all of his men were dead? Mandalorians were honorable, after all. He commands the members of Death Watch who are with him to retreat, and they escape the press box. One of the clones walks over to MrBeast and lifts him to his feet, explaining that the Republic military leadership in the area had seen his call for help, and that they had been happy to oblige. MrBeast shakes their hands, filming the entire ordeal, and the clone tells him that the Bad Batch would be at his service whenever the people of Tatooine needed it, Senate approved or not. MrBeast chuckles at this, thanking the Bad Batch for their help. The Republic Venators, led by Admiral Yularen, are able to break through the wall of criminals that surrounds the planet. They land many clones on the ground that save the necks of the valiant citizens, and the criminals can't compete with the might of the Republic. Maul and Savage, who now realize that this had been a foolish decision and it had jeopardized their secrecy as leaders of the Shadow Collective, order a retreat of the Shadow Collective forces. The criminals, who also realize that they're having their butts handed to them by the highly trained Republic forces, happily oblige. Maul and Savage are picked up by the Death Watch forces, and all who are able to end up jumping ship, hitting hyperspace, and they leave many of their weakened mercenaries behind to face the clones. Just as always, Maul is a coward who runs from his mistakes. Once the criminals leave, the Republic forces help clean up the streets of Tatooine. They arrest many of the surviving mercenaries and criminals, and they ensure that medical aid is provided to the people of Mos Espa. MrBeast is called by Yularen, whom he thanks profoundly. Yularen says that if it hadn't been for MrBeast's stream of the Boonta Eve Classic, he never would have known to intervene. In fact, many of the troops on Yularen's Venator had been watching it on their break as the chaos commenced. Apparently, lots of the clones were massive fans of MrBeast's content. This attack on Tatooine prompts many in the Republic to discuss an investigation into organized crime across the galaxy. A motion is put forth in the Senate, and a committee is created by the Supreme Chancellor to look into how to best deal with these crime rings in order to prevent something like this from happening again. Naturally, because the Senate takes forever to deal with anything, and because the Clone Wars continue to rage across the galaxy, this committee takes low priority on the Senate's to-do list. In addition, there are those in the Senate who still seek to appease the Hutts in order to further their interests in the Clone Wars, and they believe that paying attention to this committee at this time will take away from that support. So, there are those who purposefully place the investigation committee low on the Republic's agenda. After the criminal attack on his planet, MrBeast also allows for Jabba the Hutt to be extradited to the Republic so that he can be put on trial. The Hutt is formally arrested by Republic forces, and he is slated for trial later, following the events of the Clone Wars. However, because of this Hutt's massive influence, and because there are many within the Senate who are corrupt and actually follow what the crime lords want them to do, and they're in the pockets of many of these crime syndicates across the galaxy, once again, Jabba's trial is put low on the list of priorities, and there are plans that are made in order to get the Hutt out so that he can reclaim his territory from MrBeast. Following the aid provided to MrBeast by the Republic, there are a few other systems in the League of Neutral Systems that decide to join the Republic for fear that something like that might happen to them. The Republic influence across the galaxy grows, and favorable opinions of the Senate begin to grow in the Outer Rim. MrBeast, however, elects to remain neutral, despite the Republic's aid. He still thinks that it is in the best interests of his people, and he is focused on maintaining his media empire rather than getting into another conflict. There are a few Outer Rim systems that also elect to leave the CIS in this scenario and join Tatooine in their neutrality, seeing the effectiveness of MrBeast's leadership, which results in the formation of a loose coalition of Outer Rim planets that they call the Outer Rim Federation. They have a stronger military than Tatooine's security force alone, and they commit to ridding their territory of criminal activity. How does this impact the rest of our story? Let's keep going and find out. At the end of the day, the politics of a few Outer Rim systems have no influence on the politics of the greater galactic war. The Republic still wins, and it still morphs into the Empire under the rule of Palpatine. MrBeast still wants to remain independent, and he believes that it would be best in the interests of the Outer Rim Federation to stay out of the Empire. However, his colleagues disagree, and he's outvoted. They gladly welcome the Empire into their borders, eager to benefit from the promises of security and economic prosperity that the Empire is giving them. Begrudgingly, so does MrBeast. They still allow him to maintain control over his Outer Rim territories, and he is named the governor of Tatooine. He's also allowed to keep his media empire, but under the condition that he broadcasts only pro-Imperial propaganda. In the shadows, though, MrBeast provides secret information to rebel cells throughout the Outer Rim, becoming one of the many Fulcrum informants. Publicly, he maintains the image of being a good Imperial entertainer. However, privately, he harbors anti-Empire sentiments. As the galactic government expands, MrBeast's influence on Outer Rim politics during the Clone Wars becomes even more evident. A massive media figure had taken on a crime lord who now sat in jail, rotting, created a stable government, and managed to successfully boost the economy of Tatooine. As a governor, he remains benevolent, and his people love him. They still don't pay taxes, as MrBeast subsidizes the tax to the new galactic government from his own pocket, which he can still afford. For the people of Tatooine, MrBeast remains a beloved figure. The galaxy is truly better off with his leadership. Hello everyone, I hope that you enjoyed this What If video. If you did, I'd highly recommend that you check out this other video, What If Donald Trump Was the Republic Chancellor? If you have any thoughts on this story, please let us know in the comments. Would you like to see a part 2? What do you think would happen next? Have an incredible rest of your day, fellow Star Wars fans. And as always, I hope that you've had your daily, delicious dose of Bantha Stew.